Hey, Soul Stories fam! We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Comment where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. The warm yellow lights of Moonlight Cafe reflected off the old brick walls, turning the small space into a soft island of glow in the damp night. Outside, rain drizzled onto the pavement, stretching the street lights into streaks of light, like someone had accidentally scribbled across the city's canvas. Emma Carter stretched wearily behind the counter, her slender hands carrying the scent of roasted coffee. She glanced at the wall clock. Nearly midnight. The only reason the cafe was still lit was because she needed to prepare things for tomorrow and because she wasn't ready to go home yet. Her small apartment on the third floor of an old building wasn't scary, but it was so silent it felt suffocating. It was easier to stay here, with the smell of coffee and the sound of rain, than to face those four cold walls. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, then took out a jade green ceramic mug, the one she always saved just for herself. She whispered under her breath, "One last cup for me, as a farewell to the day." The familiar sounds began, the click of the grinder, the hiss of the machine. Coffee poured out, dark brown and rich, filling the air with a gentle aroma that soothed both body and soul. It was Emma's little ritual each night, after a long day, after difficult customers, after all the forced smiles, after even the old memories she tried to chase away. Memories of Daniel, the wealthy boyfriend who once promised to take her around the world, but in the end only put her on the unnecessary list. A love into which Emma had poured her whole heart, only to receive an expensive lesson in return. Promises can vanish faster than the milk foam on a cappuccino. She let out a soft laugh, bitter at the edges. "Come on, Emma. No more self-pity." The steaming cup was ready. Emma wrapped her hands around it, planning to relax in a chair for a few minutes before closing up. Ding! The door chime rang suddenly. Emma startled. Who would show up at nearly midnight? The door opened and a man stepped inside. He was tall, his posture sharp in a fitted black suit. His hair was slightly tousled, as if the night wind had undone its neatness. His face was chiseled, but his eyes were nothing like his cold exterior, tired as though he had just come from a long, pointless battle. Emma frowned. "Sorry, we're closed." The man didn't reply right away. He simply looked at her, then spoke softly, his deep voice almost a plea. "Make it for two." Emma blinked. "What?" She looked down at her hand. Yes, she was holding one cup of coffee, one cup for herself. And now this stranger wanted another. Emma let out a short laugh, half annoyed, half amused. "Do you even know what time it is? This isn't a 24/7 Starbucks, you know." The man didn't react, just pulled out a chair and sat down, his movements quiet but firm, as if her answer didn't matter at all. Emma sighed, arms folded. "You really think I'll serve coffee at midnight just because you've got a handsome face?" His eyes flickered with exhaustion, but also with something faintly playful. He tilted his head and answered softly, "If that's the case, lucky me. I don't think I'm all that handsome." Emma was caught off guard. 1 second, 2 seconds, and then she burst out laughing. She hadn't expected this man to have such a dry sense of humor. Turning back to the counter, she muttered, "Fine, 1 cup, but I'll charge double since it's after hours." "Make it triple," he replied. Emma froze, turning to him with a raised brow. "Are you trying to be funny?" "No, I really need 3 cups, but I can only drink 1. Emma couldn't help laughing. Good grief, what a strange guy. She began preparing, this time not for herself, but for the unexpected customer. As the aroma filled the cafe once more, she noticed his eyes following her every move, not with scrutiny, but as if he needed something solid to hold on to. She set the cup down on the table. Then Emma pulled out the chair across from him and sat, because honestly, she didn't feel like drinking alone anymore. He lifted the cup, inhaled deeply, and took a small sip. His eyes closed briefly, his face softening like a weary soldier finding a place to rest. "Not bad," he murmured. Emma smirked. "I'll take that as a compliment." A gentle silence fell. Outside, rain still tapped against the windows. Inside, only the ticking clock and the soft breath of coffee lingered. Emma realized that something about this man was different from all the other customers. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't fake. He wasn't hiding behind a social mask. He was just a tired soul looking for a quiet corner. She tapped her fingers lightly on the table. So, midnight stranger, what party are you running away from? The man paused, his deep eyes flickering with a faint, hard-to-name smile. You could say that. Emma tilted her head, studying him closely. There was something in that answer, half playful, half painful. But she didn't press further. The two sat in silence for a long while, as if the little cafe itself was keeping their secret. Then Emma lifted her cup and gently clinked it against his. Well then, cheers to a lousy day. He looked at her, a flicker of surprise softening into warmth. He tapped his cup back. In that moment, Emma felt something strange. Maybe tonight, with this final cup of coffee, her destiny had just shifted, and she had no idea that the man sitting across from her was no ordinary stranger. Adrian Blackwood, a name the entire financial world watched closely. But right now, in the quiet of Moonlight Cafe, he was only a lonely man whispering, "Make it for two." The party at the Grand Hall Hotel still echoed somewhere with the sound of elegant jazz mixed with hollow laughter. But Adrian Blackwood had left it all behind. He hated nights like that. Expensive wine with no flavor, calculated handshakes, smiles that reeked of falsehood the moment you closed your eyes. They called it high society. To him, it was nothing more than a gilded prison. Adrian was used to being the center of attention. The cold billionaire, the financial genius, the man whose decisions could make thousands thrive or collapse. Yet in that moment, as he walked out of the noisy ballroom, all he felt was like a puppet on the wrong stage. And so he walked, aimlessly, until the warm yellow light of a small cafe drew him in. Moonlight Cafe. The door chimed ding, and the words slipped out almost unconsciously. Make it for two. Emma Carter leaned on the counter, narrowing her eyes at the silent man sitting across from her. You know, customers like you usually drive me crazy. The man lifted his gaze, his gray eyes deep as midnight, a faint glimmer flashing inside them. What kind of customers? The suspiciously quiet kind. They come in, don't say much, just sit there staring like they're calculating something. And hey, are you deciding whether to add more sugar or add me to the menu? Adrian's lips curved faintly, a fleeting smile, brief but enough to make Emma's heart skip unexpectedly. I've never thought there would be a second option. His voice was low and steady. Emma blinked, then burst out laughing. Well, lucky me. If I ever became the cafe's special of the day, business would crash. The playful moment lightened the air, but Emma remained half cautious. She still couldn't understand why this stranger chose to sit here at nearly midnight, ordering nothing but coffee and staying so quiet. She folded her arms, sitting across from him, her eyes probing. You running away from your wife? Adrian froze slightly. Why would you think that? Well, the men who show up at my cafe this late usually fall into two categories, heartbroken or hiding from their wives. He looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, I don't have a wife. Emma nodded, pretending to be serious. Then I was right. You're heartbroken. Adrian let out a small laugh. Rare, but real. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make Emma pause in surprise. When he laughs, he doesn't look as cold as when he walked in. Resting her chin on her hand, she teased, So, did she leave you, or did you leave her? Adrian fell silent. What seemed like a joke stirred shadows of the past, a faint image of the woman who had once walked away, taking with her the warmth he had lost through his own pride. He sipped his coffee, dodging the question. That's a story for another time. Emma raised an eyebrow, tempted to press him further, but then stopped. His eyes looked so weary she couldn't bring herself to tease again. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of rain tapping against the glass. Emma sighed, changing the subject. Fine, no love talk. What do you do for a living? Adrian hesitated, thinking of all the labels the world stuck to him. Financial mogul, heartless man, the Blackwood billionaire. His lips tightened before he answered simply, I just Manage a few numbers. Emma laughed. Oh, please, you make it sound like you're an accountant at a supermarket. You could call it that, Adrian replied calmly. Emma had no idea that those numbers were entire corporations and dozens of global markets. But at this moment, Adrian didn't want to be Adrian Blackwood. He just wanted to be a stranger drinking coffee in a small cafe, listening to the rain instead of hollow flattery. Emma shrugged. I guess that's not so bad. At least you're not one of those guys who brag about being some kind of big shot. Trust me, I once knew a guy like that. And in the end, he turned out to be nothing but a cheap betrayer. Her voice carried a faint bitterness, though she quickly hid it behind a smile. Adrian stilled. He wanted to ask more, but instead he simply placed his hand on his coffee cup, an unspoken gesture of shared silence. Emma noticed it, and unexpectedly, her heart softened. This man was strange, quiet, sparing with words, yet his eyes felt more genuine than all the smooth talkers she'd ever met. She stood up, speaking as she walked toward the counter. All right, I'll make you a ginger cookie. On the house. But just this once, consider it a special deal for the uninvited guest. Adrian looked mildly surprised, then smiled faintly. Should I be grateful then? No, you should feel lucky, Emma shot back, half serious, half playful. They both chuckled softly, their laughter mingling with the rain outside, easing the loneliness inside the little cafe. Emma had no idea the man across from her was one of the most powerful figures in the financial world. To her, he was just a strange customer, quiet, a little odd, with a rare smile and sorrowful eyes. And Adrian, for the first time in years, felt a sense of relief. Relief that he didn't have to wear his mask of power. All he had to do was sit here, in this small cafe, across from a woman whose eyes were both sharp and playful. An uninvited guest, but perhaps a fateful one. In the days that followed, Moonlight Cafe suddenly felt unusual. Not because the place was suddenly crowded with customers, nor because Emma's lattes got reviewed online. The reason was much simpler. The stranger from that night came back. The first time, Emma thought, probably just a coincidence. The second time, she suspected, seriously, this guy must have way too much free time. By the third time, she was unsettled. Hold up, is he planning to turn my cafe into his personal living room? Adrian Blackwood always sat at the same table by the window, where he could look out at the fine drizzle outside. He always stayed silent for a while before ordering a black coffee, no sugar, no cream, no fancy requests. Emma often glared at him from behind the counter, occasionally tossing out a sarcastic remark. You know what? You might as well rent that chair. 3 times a week? That's clearly suspicious. Adrian lifted his eyes, a rare glint of amusement in his gray gaze. In that case, should I pay hourly or monthly rent? Emma was left speechless. This man had the uncanny ability to break every jab of hers with just one short line. She straightened her voice. Do you really not have anything better to do? I do, but I choose to be here. The bluntness of his answer left Emma without a comeback. Over time, she noticed his little habits. He never touched his phone in the cafe. No checking emails, no scrolling through feeds. He simply sat there, quietly sipping his coffee, occasionally trading a few lines of banter with her. Once, Emma asked curiously, do you come here to meditate or something? Adrian raised an eyebrow. If meditating means drinking coffee and listening to someone nag, then maybe. Emma almost choked, but strangely, on those nights the cafe felt a little less empty. One weekend evening, heavy rain poured down. The cafe was nearly deserted, the yellow light casting warm shadows on the tiled floor. Emma was wiping a table when Adrian spoke up. Emma! She looked up, startled to hear him call her name. He rarely spoke, yet now his voice was deep, clear. What is it, Mr. Quiet Customer? Adrian studied her for a long moment, then said, Have dinner with me. The cloth slipped from Emma's hand, landing with a dull thud on the table. I'm sorry, what? Dinner, at a restaurant, or anywhere you like. Emma laughed aloud, her smile tinged with mockery. You've got to be kidding. This is straight out of a rich guy's cliché. Show up at a cafe, pretend to be ordinary, then invite me to dinner. And what comes after that? Adrian stayed silent. His eyes held no mockery, no impatience, just a strange, steady resolve. Emma crossed her arms, her back straight, her tone colder. I've had enough experience with that kind of man. The type who promised dinners, trips, even a dazzling future. And in the end, left me stranded in the middle of the road. Her smile vanished, revealing an unhealed wound. I'm not making that mistake again. The atmosphere grew heavy. Even the rain outside seemed to fall harder. Adrian set his cup down, his fingers tightening around the rim. In his eyes, a shadow flickered, the memory of a love he once lost because of arrogance and selfishness. He drew in a breath and said quietly, I've made mistakes too, and I've paid the price. Emma froze. What do you mean? Adrian looked straight into her eyes, his voice rough but sincere. I once lost someone because I thought money and work mattered more. By the time I realized it was already too late. In that instant, Emma glimpsed something more than coldness in his eyes. She saw remorse, raw and deep. She wanted to ask more but stopped herself, because she understood. Everyone carried their own wounds. A long silence settled between them. Finally, Emma cleared her throat, forcing the tension away. Fine, I'll let you off the hook this time. But my answer is still no. Adrian nodded slightly. No argument, no pressure. He only said, I understand. Emma was taken aback. She was accustomed to wealthy men who tried to persuade, flaunt, and prove themselves worthy. But this man simply accepted in silence. She turned away, trying to hide her own unease. But inside, a flicker of doubt mixed with curiosity had begun to burn. Who really is this man? That night, as Adrian left the cafe, Emma watched his figure fade into the rain. An unfamiliar feeling crept into her chest, wanting to believe, yet afraid to believe. And Adrian, walking into the night, carried a heavy heart. He didn't know what he was searching for in this small cafe. All he knew was that every time he met Emma's gaze, he felt a chance, perhaps, to make up for past mistakes. An unexpected invitation, a painful but fair refusal, and a secret left unspoken. Fate, it seemed, had only just begun to unfold. Monday morning began like any other. Emma unlocked Moonlight Cafe, taking a deep breath to gather energy for the new week. But instead of the cheerful jingle of the doorbell or the comforting aroma of roasted beans, what caught her eye was a newspaper lying neatly on the table by the window. She frowned and picked it up. Bold letters stretched across the front page. Adrian Blackwood, the cold financial tycoon, returns after charity gala. Emma nearly dropped the paper. She stared at the half-page photo, a tall man in a black tuxedo, icy gaze, the faint practiced smile of the business elite. That man was her mysterious customer. No way, she whispered, her heart pounding. The image wasn't so different from the figure she'd seen, sitting silently at his usual table, sipping coffee. Yet on the paper, he appeared distant, commanding, a completely different Adrian. Anger flared. So this was all just a game? Another rich man playing commoner for amusement? When Adrian walked into the cafe that afternoon, Emma was already waiting behind the counter, eyes blazing. He immediately sensed the change in her gaze. Is something wrong? Adrian asked calmly. Emma slammed the paper onto the table, the sound sharp against the wood. Care to explain this, Mr. Blackwood? Adrian paused. He glanced at the paper, then at her, exhaling slowly. So, you found out. Found out? That's how you put it? All this time, you let me think you were just some stranger who liked black coffee, when really you're a notorious billionaire. How long were you planning to keep up this little charade? Her voice cut like a blade. Adrian stayed silent. He was accustomed to people trembling and flattering him the moment they heard his name. But Emma was different. She didn't look at him with awe. She looked at him with hurt. Do you know what I hate most? Emma bit her lip, fighting back tears. Being deceived. Once I trusted a wealthy man, and in the end, I was just a puppet for him to show off to others. And now, history repeats itself? The room fell utterly still, only the gentle patter of rain against the glass filling the silence. Adrian slowly stepped closer, but stopped when Emma instinctively moved back. His voice was low, Rough. I didn't hide it to play games. I hid it because I was afraid. Emma let out a bitter laugh. Afraid? What could someone like you possibly be afraid of? Adrian lifted his gaze, exhaustion heavy in his eyes. Afraid of repeating the same mistake. Emma froze, her anger softening just a little, but she stayed quiet, waiting. Adrian turned toward the window, as though searching for a piece of his past in the rain outside. I once loved someone, but back then I was arrogant, consumed by work. I thought she would always wait. I thought money could make up for everything I lacked. And then, one day she left, without a word. His voice sank, nearly breaking. I lost her forever. Emma bit down hard on her lip. In that moment, she no longer saw the cold tycoon from the headlines. She saw a man carrying scars that would never heal. He turned back to her, his eyes steady yet pleading. I don't want to make the same mistake. With you. Emma's chest tightened. Part of her wanted to believe in his sincerity, but another voice screamed, Don't be foolish again. She turned away, her voice trembling. That's easy to say. However, I'm unsure if I have the courage to trust again. Adrian didn't push. He only gave a small nod. I understand, but Emma, give me a chance to prove it. I won't make you someone's pastime. I only want to stay. For the first time, his eyes weren't cold. They held a true, earnest plea. Emma stayed silent for a long time, her breath mingling with the bitter scent of coffee, stinging her nose. Finally, she murmured, I need time. Adrian nodded again, not forcing, only leaving her with one final line as he walked out. I'll wait, as long as it takes. When the door closed, Emma sank into a chair. Her heart was chaos, anger, confusion, and a faint, fragile spark of trust. The newspapers painted Adrian Blackwood as cold and powerful, but the man who had just said, I don't want to repeat the same mistake with you, had been painfully real. And Emma couldn't deny it. In that moment, her heart had stirred. Moonlight Cafe had never been a big player in the industry. The little shop tucked into the corner of the street mostly served office workers from nearby buildings and a few romantics who liked watching the rain through its windows. Emma had never dreamed of turning it into a chain of luxury cafes. For her, it was enough to keep a safe place where she could breathe in the scent of coffee every morning, hear customers' laughter every evening, and call it home. But that small dream was suddenly threatened. One afternoon, a man in a shiny tailored suit walked in, flanked by two assistants. He introduced himself as a representative of a real estate corporation. His voice, overly confident, instantly rubbed Emma the wrong way. Miss Carter, this shop is located in the area we're planning to develop. If you agree to sell, we'll pay you a very generous price. Emma tightened her grip on the cleaning cloth in her hand. I'm sorry, but Moonlight Cafe isn't for sale. You should reconsider. The man raised an eyebrow. Because once our project begins, you won't have any choice but to leave. The veiled threat sent a chill through her, but she lifted her chin. I've already lost too much in my life. This cafe is my home. I'm not selling. The man sneered, dropped a business card on the table, and walked out. Emma sank into a chair, her hand trembling. Fear crept into her chest, but she forced herself to breathe. I can handle this. I've overcome harder things before. What Emma didn't know was that, from the corner of the cafe, Adrian had seen everything. He didn't intervene, only watched in silence. But in his gray eyes, a cold light flickered. That evening, as Emma cleaned with a tense face, Adrian stepped up to the counter. You don't have to face this alone. Emma looked up, frowning. You heard all that? Adrian gave a slight nod. I can help. Emma let out a dry laugh. There it is again. The billionaire swoops in to save the world routine. I don't want to be the kind of woman who has to rely on some wealthy man. I don't think you need to rely on anyone. Adrian's voice was low, steady. I just want to stand behind you so that, when you stumble, you don't have to fall. Emma froze for a moment. His words weren't dramatic, weren't grand. They were steady and gentle, like a wall quietly holding her up. She didn't know how to respond, so she stayed silent. But inside, the weight on her chest felt just a little lighter. The next day, the real estate company encountered unexpected legal barriers to its project. Rumors spread quickly, But no one knew that Adrian Blackwood had made a few quiet phone calls to block their plan of swallowing Moonlight Cafe whole. Emma simply believed she had gotten lucky. That evening, with few customers around, Emma decided to close early, until Adrian unexpectedly offered, "Let me stay and help." "Help? Do you even know how to make a cappuccino?" Emma chuckled. "No, but I can cut vegetables." Emma raised a brow. "A billionaire who can chop vegetables? Sounds like a bad joke." Adrian only shrugged, stepped behind the counter, slipped off his suit jacket, and rolled up his sleeves. Emma was half amused, half stunned. The image in front of her didn't match at all with the man in the newspapers. "All right then, I'll test your vegetable chopping skills. If you make a mistake, I'll charge you extra on your coffee bill." To her surprise, Adrian was pretty good. His grip on the knife was steady, each slice of tomato neat and clean enough that Emma couldn't help glancing at him in disbelief. "Where did you learn that?" "My grandmother taught me," Adrian said simply. His answer caught Emma off guard. She realized that behind his distant exterior, there were still ordinary, simple memories, like anyone else's. Together they prepared a simple dinner, creamy pumpkin soup and toasted sandwiches. In the little kitchen, the sound of chopping mixed with laughter. Emma teased, "Careful there. If you burn the bread, I'm putting it on the menu as Blackwood Sandwich, charred with luxury." Adrian actually laughed, the rare sound echoing warmly through the cafe. When dinner was ready, the little shop felt transformed into a cozy home. Emma sat across from Adrian, the golden light brushing over her soft brown hair. They ate, talking about small, ordinary things, favorite foods, childhood memories, even silly mishaps, like the time Emma once spilled coffee all over a customer and got scolded for days. Adrian listened, occasionally adding a dry remark that made her laugh. In that moment, she almost forgot who he was out there. Not a billionaire, not a tycoon, but just a man sharing a simple dinner with her. And in Emma's heart, for the first time, a dangerous yet hopeful thought flickered. What if I could trust him again? Later that night, after the dishes were done, Emma sank into her familiar chair. Adrian was still quietly tidying the crumbs off the table. She looked at him, her voice soft but sincere. "Thank you." Adrian paused, glancing back at her. "For the meal or for the cafe?" Emma hesitated, then smiled faintly. "For both." In that moment, inside the small cafe, they felt like a family who had just finished dinner. An imperfect family, but warm enough to melt away their loneliness. Emma didn't say it out loud, but inside, another piece of her wall had crumbled. And Adrian knew he had just taken another small but certain step on the path to never repeating the mistakes of his past. One early weekday morning, Emma had just pulled up the metal shutter of Moonlight Cafe when she caught two young staff whispering, phones in hand. They stared at the sight of her and quickly shoved their devices away, but she still caught snippets. "The news site just posted it. It's trending." "Yeah, no wonder he's been showing up here so often." A knot of unease tightened in Emma's chest. It didn't take long before a regular customer held out his phone toward her, his voice half playful, half mocking. "Miss Carter, looks like this cafe is about to become the hot spot for the rich and powerful, huh?" On the screen blared a glaring headline, "Billionaire Blackwood spotted with a common barista, a modern-day Cinderella romance?" The photo was unmistakable, her and Adrian sitting together in the cafe, laughing at a charred sandwich. Heat rushed to Emma's face. She stammered, "That's just nonsense." The customer shrugged, tossing out casually, "Nonsense or not, the whole town's talking." All day, Emma endured curious stares from customers. Some smiled knowingly, others whispered behind her back. One even called out, "One Blackwood latte, please. Bet it's sweet." The cafe burst into laughter. Emma forced a strained smile, choking back her anger, but inside it felt like her chest was being crushed. Even her two trusted staff grew worried. One pulled her aside into a corner. "Emma, I'm afraid our cafe won't survive this kind of pressure. Rumors like these, sure, some curious folks will show up, but our regulars might never come back." Emma bit her lip, unable to find an answer. That evening, as she finally slumped into a chair after a grueling day, the door swung open, and the man who stepped in made her heart freeze. Daniel. How long had it been? Nearly 3 years. The ex-boyfriend who had shattered her faith in love. Still dressed in a sharp suit, still wearing that smug smile, only now his eyes seemed even colder. Emma Carter, his voice drawled, savoring each word as if he already held the upper hand. I must say, the headlines are amusing. You never learn, do you? Emma's reply was icy. What are you doing here? To remind you that history repeats itself. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice to a cutting whisper. You were foolish enough to believe me once. And now, another billionaire. Do you really think this time will be different? Emma trembled but forced herself to stay firm. Adrian is not like you. Daniel laughed harshly. All rich men are the same, Emma. We play for a while, then we walk away. You think a financial tycoon would actually stick around for a common barista? Each word sliced through her like a knife to an old wound. Emma's throat tightened. Part of her wanted to scream that Adrian was different, but another part feared Daniel might be right. Take my advice. Wake up before it's too late. Daniel tossed out his final words before turning on his heel, leaving behind a suffocating trail of expensive cologne. When Adrian arrived that night, Emma was nothing like her usual playful self. She stood behind the counter, scrubbing at a spotless cup, her gaze cold. Emma, Adrian called softly, you shouldn't come here anymore. Her voice was rigid. He froze. Because of the news? That's just tabloid trash. It's not just the news. Emma lifted her eyes, shimmering with tears, but steady with resolve. I was already turned into a joke once by a wealthy man, and now everyone out there is laughing at me all over again. I can't go through that twice. Adrian stepped forward, but she backed away. I don't want this cafe, this life to turn into a circus for gossip. I don't want to be someone's Cinderella story. Adrian's chest ached. He could see the panic in her eyes, the scars from the past that hadn't healed. His voice dropped, deep with sorrow. You're shutting me out. I have to protect myself. Emma turned away, fighting back tears. I'm sorry, Adrian. He stood there, frozen, his hands clenched tight. He could summon 1,000 ways to crush rumors, to silence the world with his power. But standing before Emma's trembling shoulders, he felt utterly powerless. At last, Adrian spoke, his voice hoarse. If you think staying away from me will give you peace, then I'll accept it. But know this, Emma, I have never, not once, thought of you as a joke. He walked out, leaving behind a heavy emptiness. Emma collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands as tears streamed down. Deep down, she knew she had felt Adrian's sincerity. But the old wounds, the cruel words, the watchful stares, they chained her heart in fear, keeping her from stepping forward. Outside, the rain fell again, just like the night they first met. But this time, instead of faded warmth, only a cold distance remained. Moonlight Cafe closed earlier than usual. Emma sat inside the darkened shop without turning on the lights, letting only the dim glow from the street seep through the windows. Curled up in a chair behind the counter, she clutched a cold cup of coffee to her chest. All day, the words had buzzed in her head like a swarm of bees. Common barista, modern-day Cinderella, and Daniel's voice cut deepest of all. All rich men are the same. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, telling herself she needed distance and protection for her heart once again. But why did it hurt so much every time she remembered the look in Adrian's eyes before he walked away? Meanwhile, Adrian was unraveling. For 2 days, Emma hadn't picked up the phone or answered a single message. He drove past the cafe, finding it dark, doors locked tight. For the first time in years, Adrian felt completely out of control. Meetings went unfinished, projects pushed aside. All he could think of was Emma shutting him out. By the third night, he couldn't take it anymore. Leaving his sprawling estate behind, ignoring his security detail and his schedule, he drove straight to Moonlight Cafe. The drizzle soaked through his shoulders as he pounded on the door, until Emma finally had no choice but to open it. Adrian, are you insane? Emma gasped, hair messy, face drawn with exhaustion. He didn't answer. He stepped inside and slammed the door behind him. In his gray eyes burned a fire Emma had never seen before. Why are you avoiding me? His voice was hoarse, urgent. Because I don't want to be someone's joke again. Emma bit her lip, trying to keep steady. You saw it yourself, what people out there are saying about me, about us. Let them talk. Adrian's voice rose, nearly breaking. Emma, do you think I care? I've lived my whole life under whispers and stares. But for the first time, I'm afraid. He stepped closer, his hands gripping her shoulders firmly. I'm afraid of losing you. Emma froze, her eyes trembling. Don't say that. Adrian drew in a deep breath, each word carved into the air. I made a mistake once. I lost the woman I loved most because I was arrogant and buried myself in work. I thought I was strong enough to live without anyone. That was the greatest mistake of my life. And now, if you walk away, I don't know if I can survive losing someone again. Emma's throat closed, her whole body trembling. Adrian tightened his hold, his voice low but unwavering, echoing through the empty cafe. I swear I will never let you go. Even if the whole world stands against us, I will still be by your side. The words pierced straight through the wall Emma had built around her heart. It wasn't flowery or staged. It was the raw fear of a man who had lost too much already. Adrian, Emma whispered, her voice breaking. He lowered his forehead to hers, their breaths mingling, his heartbeat pounding as wildly as the first time he dared to feel something real. I don't need you to believe me right away. But please, don't run from me. A tear slipped down Emma's cheek. She couldn't even tell if it was hers or his. She closed her eyes, letting Adrian's arms enfold her completely. In his embrace, she felt something she had never known before. Safety. Not the safety of grand promises or glittering plans, but of a fierce, desperate protection that felt unshakably real. For the first time, the mocking laughter outside faded. Daniel's voice, the biting headlines, all of it disappeared. All she could hear was Adrian's steady heartbeat. She nodded faintly, whispering, I'll try to believe you. Adrian drew her in tighter, breathing deeply as if life itself had just returned to him. A faint smile touched his lips, though his eyes burned with solemn resolve. Thank you, and I promise I'll spend my entire life proving you were right to trust me. That night, rain continued tapping against the window panes. But inside Moonlight Cafe, two people sat close in tender silence, sharing the warmth of an unfinished cup of coffee. Emma leaned her head against Adrian's shoulder, her heart trembling yet peaceful. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but maybe, just maybe, this time she had found a man truly willing to protect her. Soul Stories fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands are listening and sharing together. That night, Moonlight Cafe still carried the scent of freshly roasted coffee. Emma sat alone checking the books. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the occasional drizzle against the window. Suddenly, a strange burning smell hit her nose. Emma frowned and looked up. From the tiny kitchen, black smoke was curling upward. Oh no! She rushed over to find sparks flaring from an old grinder's wiring. The fire was small but spreading fast, licking up the wooden shelves. Emma scrambled for the fire extinguisher, but her hands shook so badly she couldn't pull the pin. Smoke stung her eyes, choked her lungs. Boom! A small blast erupted from the outlet. Emma stumbled back, crashing against the wall, her heart pounding. The door burst open. Emma! Adrian appeared, hair dripping with rain, panic blazing in his eyes like she had never seen. He charged straight toward her, pulling her into his arms. What are you doing here? Emma coughed, chest tight. I was driving by. I saw the smoke. Adrian growled, voice raw. God, Emma, did you think you could handle this alone? Before she could answer, he bent down and lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Put me down, she struggled weakly. Don't be reckless, Emma. His voice cracked, trembling with urgency, so unlike his usual calm. I'd rather burn in there myself than see you hurt. Emma froze. The words shot straight through every doubt she'd been holding on to. Outside, the rain came down in sheets. Adrian set her on the curb, his hands gripping her shoulders as if afraid she'd vanish. Behind them, firefighters were already dousing the blaze, gray smoke billowing into the night. Emma looked up at him, sweat mixed with raindrops on his forehead. But what shook her most was his gaze. Not anger, not pride, but fear. Fear of losing her. Adrian, her voice wavered. He squeezed her hand, his own shaking. Don't ever scare me like that again. You don't know. Just thinking about losing you nearly drove me mad. Emma's heart shattered open. In that smoky, rain-soaked moment, she saw the truth. This man had never thought of her as a joke. He was terrified because he truly needed her. She stopped thinking. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him down. Their lips met in the cold rain and bitter smoke. The kiss wasn't perfect. Shaky, urgent, the desperate meeting of two people who had just outrun disaster. But in its rawness, it was the truest kiss Emma had ever known. Adrian held her tight, his hand trembling as it traced her back. The kiss was a vow unspoken, carried only through breath and the frantic rhythm of their hearts. When they finally pulled apart, Emma gasped for air, her cheeks burning red. You really are insane. Adrian gave a rough laugh, though his eyes stayed serious. Then I'm insane for you. Emma laughed through her tears, resting her forehead against his chest. In his arms, surrounded by ashes and rain, she felt a home she had never known before. Later, when the fire crews left, only a few scorch marks remained inside. The damage wasn't too great. Emma sat on the steps, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the cafe. Adrian stood beside her, shirt clinging to his body from the rain, his eyes never leaving her. She turned to him, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion. My cafe could burn again. Would you still run in? Adrian didn't hesitate. 100 times over, I'd still run in. Emma's throat tightened. For the first time, she believed his words weren't empty promises. And there, with smoke still lingering in the air, Emma realized something. True love is often found in the most fragile moments, when neither has anything left to hide but a bare, beating heart. Not long after the fire at Moonlight Cafe, news about Adrian and Emma erupted once again. But this time it wasn't just tabloids, it came from within the Blackwood family itself. One evening, Adrian drove Emma to the Blackwood estate for what he called a formal dinner. Emma was reluctant, but he squeezed her hand tightly and reassured her. You're not alone? Yet the moment they stepped into the grand hall, Emma felt the storm brewing. Adrian's mother, an elegant woman in a pearl-colored silk gown, looked her up and down as though inspecting merchandise. His cousin gave a dry cough, set his wineglass down and smirked. So this is the barista who has my cousin so infatuated? Emma flushed red, her fingers clutching the hem of her dress. Adrian's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp. This is Emma, and she deserves respect like anyone else. The atmosphere at the table grew so tense it felt carved from stone. Throughout dinner, the questions came like blows. What do you intend to do to fit Adrian's position? Do you think you're capable of stepping into this family? Until finally someone declared outright, a barista will only drag Adrian down. Emma bit her lip hard, her trembling hands hidden under the table. Never in her life had she felt so small. At last, Adrian's father spoke, his voice heavy with authority. Adrian, you must understand. One day you'll inherit this entire empire, but if you insist on choosing this girl, do not expect our approval. The table fell silent. Every pair of eyes was fixed on Adrian. Emma could barely breathe. She knew his family had the power to make her disappear in an instant. But Adrian sat tall, his gaze cold yet blazing with defiance. If she isn't accepted, then I don't want this family empire at all. The words cracked through the hall like thunder. Adrian! His mother gasped. Do you realize what you're saying? He nodded firmly. I know exactly. I've spent my entire life trying to please this family, to build the Blackwood Empire. But now it's time I choose what truly matters. And that is Emma. Emma's heart reeled. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she quickly bowed her head so no one could see. Dinner ended in an icy silence. The Blackwoods stared at them like traitors, while Adrian clasped Emma's hand and led her out like a warrior who had just declared war on the world. On the drive back, Emma stayed quiet. At last, her voice broke softly. You just put your entire future, your inheritance, on the line. For me, Adrian turned, his gaze softening. Not for you, for us. I once lost everything because I didn't have the courage to choose love. This time, I won't make that mistake again." Emma burst into tears. She couldn't hold back anymore, throwing her arms around him. "Adrian, I don't want you to lose everything because of me. I'm not losing anything," he whispered against her ear. "I'm only finding myself again." In his embrace, Emma knew the storms were only beginning, but for the first time in her life, she no longer wanted to run. If he dared to defy his entire family for love, then she would dare to stand by him, no matter the cost. The New York sky that morning was gray, heavy as if warning of an oncoming storm. In the Blackwood Towers high-rise apartment, Adrian sat silently by the window. The phone on his desk buzzed nonstop. Dozens of missed calls from his father, his mother, the board of directors. He didn't pick up. His father's ultimatum from the night before still echoed in his head. End things with her, or forget about inheriting Blackwood. Once Adrian might have chosen the company, but now when he thought of Emma, the tired smile behind her counter, the tearful eyes when she whispered, "I'll try to believe you," he knew the answer. Adrian rose, shrugged on his coat. There was no more room for hesitation. Emma was wiping down tables at Moonlight Cafe when the door swung open. Adrian walked in, his eyes shadowed yet burning with resolve. "Adrian?" she gasped. "You look terrible." He strode to the counter, placed both hands firmly on it, and locked eyes with her. "I've made my decision, Emma." "Decision? What decision?" Adrian drew in a long breath, his voice low, each word deliberate. "I'm leaving the Blackwood family, starting over from scratch." Emma froze, the rag slipping from her hand to the floor. Do you realize what you just said?" "I do, and I've never been more certain." His nod was firm. "The company, the power, the fortune. None of it matters if the cost is losing you." Emma pressed her hand to her forehead, tears welling. "Adrian, this is madness. You have everything, and you're throwing it away. For me?" He shook his head, his gaze softening, though the fire never dimmed. "Not throwing away, choosing again. I lived for things that never truly mattered, and I lost love once because of it. This will be the last mistake I allow myself to make. I won't repeat it." Emma's chest ached, torn between fear and warmth. "But what if it all collapses? What if they turn you into a laughingstock?" Adrian stepped around the counter, took her trembling hands in his. "Then I'll wash dishes with you, wipe tables, and sell coffee. As long as you're beside me, I'm not afraid of anything." Emma's tears spilled over. She bit her lip, then squeezed his hands tight. "If you truly want to start over, then we'll start over together. Moonlight Cafe may not be big, but it will be our beginning." Adrian blinked, stunned. He had expected her to walk away to set him free. Instead, she said, "We." Just one small word, but it shook his heart to its core. He pulled her into his arms, whispering against her ear, "Thank you." The next morning, headlines exploded. Billionaire Adrian Blackwood announces exit from family empire. Love worth more than an empire? The press sneered. Tabloids feasted. But through the storm of public opinion, Emma stayed by his side. At first, Adrian worked out of a small corner in Moonlight Cafe, turning the shop into a temporary office. There he drafted plans for a new investment firm focused on green finance and community projects, dreams he had long harbored but never dared to pursue. One afternoon, Emma brought him a cup of coffee, teasing, "Quite the glamorous office. Desk, one old wooden table. Secretary, one cranky barista." Adrian glanced up, a smirk tugging at his lips. "But the only place where I feel at peace." Emma flushed, setting the cup down quickly, though her smile betrayed her. Late one night, after cleaning up the cafe, they sat together. Emma slid a steaming mug toward him, her eyes steady. "You know your biggest mistake was losing the one you loved, but the final mistake you could ever make is thinking you're alone in this journey." Adrian went still. He stared at her for a long moment, then stood and drew her into his arms. "My final mistake was believing you'd ever leave. Thank you for staying." Emma rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the beat of his heart. a rhythm like a promise of tomorrow. Inside that little cafe, beneath warm golden light and worn wooden chairs, they were no longer just a barista and a billionaire. They were two souls beginning again from zero, but this time, together. Dawn filtered through the cafe's glass windows, casting a pale golden glow across the familiar wooden tables. Emma opened Moonlight Cafe earlier than usual and carefully placed a small new sign by the door. Moonlight Cafe, 2 cups. A new journey begins here. She smiled as she read the words. 2 cups, a symbol of that fateful night when Adrian first walked in and said, "Make it for 2." Adrian arrived soon after, dressed simply in a white shirt, looking nothing like the Blackwood tycoon from the headlines. He carried a stack of documents and set them down on the largest table in the cafe. "Today we're meeting with a few small investors," he said, voice deep yet full of excitement. "Not in some grand ballroom, just here, in this cafe, because I want to start in the only place that truly means something." Emma folded her arms, teasing, "And how exactly do you plan to win them over? With the aroma of cappuccinos?" Adrian raised a brow, the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "If necessary, I'll enlist the best barista in the city." Emma shot him a playful glare, but pride swelled in her chest. She saw the spark in his eyes, the same brilliance as before, but no longer the cold gleam of power. This was the light of a man who finally believed in a new dream. The meeting took place right there in the cafe. A few of Adrian's old friends, some young entrepreneurs, and even a handful of regular customers came to listen. Adrian laid out his vision, a new investment firm dedicated to sustainable projects, from organic farms to green energy. "I've handled billion-dollar deals before, but none of them gave me the pride I feel in helping a small community stand on its own," he said, his gaze flicking to Emma. "This place reminded me that real value isn't in massive numbers, but in people." His sincerity caught many by surprise. They had only known Adrian Blackwood, the ruthless financier. Now they saw a man transformed, warm, determined, and unshakably human. Behind the counter, Emma watched with quiet faith. This wasn't just Adrian's new beginning. It was theirs. The days that followed were busier than ever. By day, Emma ran the cafe. By night, she sat with Adrian, combing through business plans and offering feedback. Sometimes she snapped at his perfectionism. Sometimes he laughed when she sketched logos with colored pencils. "Be honest, the logo looks awful, doesn't it?" She huffed, hands on her hips. Adrian chuckled, pulling her close. "No, it's the most beautiful logo I've ever seen, because it's ours." Emma pretended to pout, but her cheeks glowed pink. Together they worked through long nights, tired but happy. Moonlight Cafe was no longer just a coffee shop. It had become a hub for the community. It had become a warm startup headquarters, where every plan was drafted and every idea took root. News of Adrian leaving the Blackwood Empire was still a hot topic. Many mocked him, calling him a fool in love. But when his first project succeeded, a struggling organic farm revived through his investment, opinions began to shift. One newspaper wrote, "Adrian Blackwood, abandoning the throne to build an empire from seeds of green." Emma read the article quietly, smiling. Adrian didn't need the recognition anymore, but she was glad the world was finally beginning to see the man she saw. One evening after the cafe closed, Emma and Adrian cooked dinner together in the little kitchen. She sliced vegetables, shaking her head with a laugh. "You know, I never imagined I'd be chopping carrots with a billionaire in this tiny cafe." Adrian's knife moved smoothly, his chuckle low. "And I never imagined I'd walk away from an empire just to hear you complain about carrots." Emma burst out laughing, then fell silent, eyes searching his. "Do you regret it?" Adrian set down the knife, took her hand firmly, his gaze unwavering. "Not for a second. I've never been this happy." Tears shimmered in Emma's eyes, not from pain this time, but from pure emotion. "Then, I'll go with you, wherever this path leads." He pulled her into his arms, whispering, "And I'll never let you walk it alone." In the weeks that followed, Moonlight Cafe grew busier, not just with coffee drinkers, but with young dreamers seeking guidance, small startups meeting over lattes, and community groups finding a home. The cafe became a space of connection and hope. Emma looked around one evening, watching the warm glow of lights across the smiling faces of so many. Beside her, Adrian was deep in conversation with a group of students about economics, his tone calm and genuine. And Emma realized they hadn't just built a new beginning for themselves, they had created one for others too. Late that night after cleaning up, Emma poured 2 cups of coffee and set them on the table. "One for me," she smiled softly, "and one for you." Adrian smirked, remembering that first fateful night. He lifted his cup, clinking it gently against hers. "To new beginnings," he said. "And to us," Emma replied. In that moment, all weariness melted away. What remained was a simple happiness, warm enough to last a lifetime. 1 year after Adrian left the Blackwood Empire, the name Blackwood Capital Green had become a phenomenon. The small company that began inside a cafe had grown into a bright modern office. But Adrian still kept Moonlight Cafe as his headquarters of the heart. The projects he and Emma ran together, from organic farms on the outskirts to startup funds for students, were all thriving. The press had begun to change its tune. The billionaire who gave up his throne to build a green empire. The most inspiring story of the year. Emma read the article and smiled. She knew the success didn't just belong to Adrian. It belonged to both of them. One autumn evening, Moonlight Cafe shimmered with candlelight. Emma thought it was just a simple anniversary dinner, but the moment she walked inside, she froze. The cafe was filled with white tulips. The flowers she once told Adrian were her favorite for their simplicity. The walls were lined with photos capturing their journey. Their first dinner in the cafe kitchen, Adrian speaking before investors. Their desperate kiss in the ashes of the fire. Adrian stepped out from behind the counter, not with a cup of coffee, but with a small velvet box. He knelt down, his gaze both tender and unwavering. "Emma Carter, you taught me what true love means, what starting over means, what family means. I once thought my mistakes would define my life. But no, it was you who redefined it." He opened the box, the diamond ring gleaming under the candlelight. "Will you let me spend my whole life loving you, protecting you, and building the home we began with one simple cup of coffee?" Emma burst into tears. Everyone in the cafe, friends, employees, investors, held their breath, waiting. She nodded, tears streaming, then threw herself into his arms. Yes, I will." Applause erupted, mingled with laughter and happy tears. Their wedding was held in the garden behind Moonlight Cafe, the same place where Adrian and Emma had once sat together among smoke and ashes after the fire. The Blackwood family had fiercely opposed them at first, but after seeing Adrian build success without ever leaning on his inheritance, they were forced to acknowledge his choice. His father appeared, still stern, but with a flicker of pride in his eyes. When Adrian took Emma's hand before the altar of tulips, his father stepped forward, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "You chose your own path, and you proved yourself right. I accept Emma as my daughter-in-law." Emma was overwhelmed, nearly speechless. She caught the rare shimmer of tears at the corner of Mrs. Blackwood's eyes. In that moment, the distance between them finally dissolved. Their vows carried through the breeze in the scent of flowers. "A mistake once made me lose everything, but this time I will spend my entire life cherishing and protecting you." The garden erupted in applause. A year later, sunlight streamed into the cozy room above Moonlight Cafe. Emma sat by the crib, cradling their baby girl in her arms. She had Adrian's gray eyes and Emma's shy smile. Adrian walked in, still in his white shirt, but no longer the cold businessman he once was. His gaze was warm, glowing with the light of a new father. He bent down, pressing a gentle kiss to his wife and child. "All my life I thought I was searching for happiness, but it was always right here." Emma looked up, smiling through tears of joy. "One last cup of coffee brought me to you, and now we have a family." Adrian sat down beside her, wrapping both Emma and the baby in his arms. The room filled with Emma's soft laughter, the baby's tiny cries, and the comforting scent of coffee, the same fragrance that had begun it all. Outside the window, the cafe sign glistened in the sunlight. 2 cups for life. Thank you for being part of Soul Stories. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Soul Stories family.